like to thank the co-chairs for today's event, Lou and Harold. I want to thank Rabbi Bernstein and Karen Mongo for organizing this commemoration. It's really an honor and a privilege for me to be here with you on this Yom HaShoah. Yom HaShoah provides us with a reminder of our responsibility to recommit ourselves to those who survived the most unimaginable atrocities. I'm so privileged in this part of the United States to represent this particular community because so many of you have shared with me your own personal stories of survival, your own stories, those of loved ones who suffered through the most horrendous injustices of our time. Every day when I go to Washington, I remember those stories. For the survivors in our community and throughout the world, we must work every day to ensure that they can live out their lives without hardship. It's unconscionable that any survivor should go without needed medical care or transportation. No survivor should ever have to choose between whether to buy groceries or whether to buy their medical prescriptions. In 2009, the United States joined with 46 other countries to reaffirm and strengthen their commitment to property restitution for Holocaust survivors. The attendees, including a large number of European countries, stated that it was their moral responsibility to provide and caring for survivors. The conference was meant to serve as a wake-up call to European nations to do more for the welfare and legacy of Holocaust survivors, especially in light of the trend of right-leaning political parties across the continent, many of which have troubling, to say the least, opinions about Jews and the Holocaust. These countries must remember their obligations. Unfortunately, it's 5 years later, and we've witnessed little progress by many Eastern European countries. Lithuania is the only country since 2009 to pass legislation regarding restitution for the seizure of communal property. Most notably, Poland, a country with the largest Jewish population in pre-Holocaust Europe, has yet to fully recognize the need to restore private property to the rightful Jewish owners. These serve as reminders to me that though we have made major achievements, there is so much more to be done to achieve justice for Holocaust survivors and to grant them honor. It's our duty to ensure that as the needs of the survivor community becomes more and more urgent, that we all work together to preserve the dignity of this generation. Their stories must live on through the next generations. As I tell my own kids and students every time I have the chance to speak with them, and I'll tell these students here, you are the last generation who will be privileged to hear these stories directly from survivors. And with that comes real responsibility. It's our duty to ensure that as the needs become more and more urgent, we're all working together to preserve this dignity. And to this end, there's so much work to be done to better educate Americans on the Holocaust. It's far too common for people, including politicians, to invoke the Holocaust, to make comparisons that are grossly inaccurate and that are deeply offensive. Hate groups continue to exist around this country and to spout spiteful and hateful beliefs. It's therefore imperative that we address and correct this trend in our education system so future generations learn of the horrors of the Holocaust and keep the memory of those over 6 million individuals alive. This responsibility falls on all of us, individually and collectively. That's why I'm working to support organizations to lead Holocaust education programs that are directed at our youth. That's why Palm Beach County is partnering with outside groups to bring innovative Holocaust education programs that bring to life faces and stories of the victims and give students the opportunity, as I said before, to interact with survivors. We must make it clear to our children that the lessons of the Holocaust, even 70 years later, are still relevant and applicable. Our children must know that their voices hold great power. While speaking up against injustices, no matter how small, makes a difference. When I talk to young people, I remind them of the stories of those who perished at the hands of the Nazis, or the harrowing tales of survival against unimaginable odds. But I also tell them about those who were brave enough who were willing to stand up to do what they knew was right. Those who chose to risk their own lives to save their Jewish friends, neighbors, and even strangers. Some of the most famous
to be honored as righteous among the nations, like Raoul Wallenberg and Oskar Schindler, or Miep Gies, who hid Anne Frank, and the Danish resistance fighters who ferried almost all of Denmark's Jews to safety in Sweden. The countless others that hid Jews in their homes, took in children and made them members of their own families, provided false documents to Jewish families, or smuggled Jews out of their home countries. These were ordinary people, simply trying to do what was right. And these are the lessons that we must teach to future generations. For as Rabbi Hillel said, if I am only for myself, what am I? And even though the tragedies of the Holocaust happened over 70 years ago, the memory must never be forgotten. That's why we take the lessons of the past and apply them to now and the future. That's why as we take time to remember the more than 6 million lives lost, we also have to continue to work to ensure that no matter what happens, other generations cannot sit idly by while millions suffer elsewhere. Words must be met with action, so that when we say never again, the entire world knows that we mean never again. As a community, we have to continue to work on behalf of those people around the world who cannot stand up for themselves, those who are denied their most basic human rights, for the women in Iran who face state-sanctioned gender discrimination, for the LGBT groups in Uganda fighting for their lives, for the right to love, and for Syrian children who are struggling daily to survive in their war-torn home. Those suffering from horrific abuses have to be kept in our thoughts, and we have to stand up for them. Now, I know that it's difficult in this day and age to believe that there are still those struggling for basic human rights. And let's let the stories of those who have struggled against all odds teach us a new generation. Teach a new generation the true meaning of courage. Let us find the courage ourselves to stand up for those who have no voice. As Elie Wiesel said, there may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must never be a time when we fail to protest. And his words still ring true today. 70 years later, anti-Semitism is still alarmingly present around the world. Even in 2014, there are radicalized pockets that propagate age-old, baseless hatred of Jews, often as a scapegoat for deeper problems. It continues in France, where the victims were innocent day school students. In Japan, where 300 copies of Anne Frank's diary were vandalized. And even in our own backyard, where a white supremacist shouted Heil Hitler as he shot people at the Kansas Jewish Community Center and Jewish retirement home. But the sad reality is that the region with the most unnerving anti-Semitism and the most concerning trends is Europe. In Hungary and in Greece, there are ultranationalist parties that have very clear anti-Semitic beliefs. In Greece, the Golden Dawn Party closely associates with Nazi symbols. In Hungary, the Nationalist Jobbik Party is the third largest party in the parliament and has a full history of xenophobic and racist beliefs. The level of vitriol reached a terrifying point in 2012 when a member of parliament from the party demanded that Jews be registered on a list as threats to Hungarian national security. It's equally disturbing when anti-Semitism is used as a provocation tool. We've all heard the reports coming out of Ukraine, where Nazi-era scare tactics are being used against the Jewish community. Leaflets were distributed in eastern Ukraine that ordered Jews to register and list the property they own. Now, no party has taken responsibility for that, but it's clear that the instigators, whoever did this, were trying to evoke the same anti-Semitic policies that were used during the Holocaust with little concern for the sensitivity of the small Jewish communities in their area. These disgusting actions serve both as a stark reminder that Jews around the world still face anti-Semitism and persecution, and as the perfect answer to why a strong state of Israel is so important. You can't possibly conceive what Israel means to Jews around the world without understanding how close the Nazis came to the complete extermination of European Jewry and the eradication of Jewish European culture. You can create dozens of hypotheticals about what would have happened if the modern state of Israel had existed during World War II. But the fact is that today, in 2014, there is a country where any Jewish person from anywhere in the world can seek refuge from oppression or anti-Semitism, and that is worth fighting for. That's why I work hard every day to make sure that any attempt to weaken or delegitimize or destroy Israel is met with the strongest possible opposition from our government here in America. And when we hear objections to Israel's existence, or we hear for calls for Israel's destruction, we see these claims for what they really are: thinly veiled anti-Semitism. When Iranian leaders in one breath vilify Israel and predict its collapse, then refer to the Holocaust as a myth and question its very occurrence, it's clear to me. When the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement uses smear campaigns to isolate Israel from economic, social, and cultural interactions with other countries, when it singles out one country while disregarding countries around the world that egregiously violate fundamental human rights, it's difficult to distinguish their claims that they're merely objecting to government policies from the real undertones of anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, that line is too often blurred. So as we stand here today as a community, I want to take a moment to thank all of you and thank everyone in this very special South Florida community for being an incredible reminder of the past and a true inspiration for the future. Last summer, I'll finish with this. Last summer, my two daughters had the incredible opportunity to travel with hundreds of high school kids to Poland and to Israel. And when they were in Poland, they stood together. They stood together as young, proud Jews, first on the railroad tracks, on their way into Auschwitz, then again as they said Kaddish in the concentration camp, and finally, as they, just after that experience, descended from the steps of their charter plane at the airport, at Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv, where they danced together and sang Am Yisrael Chai. Today,